So let me kind of tell you the different hats I've worn in my life. One was I parented a rad child when my grandson Blake, I have a picture of him when he was in kindergarten, and then when I moved him to a private school, the kindergarten picture was heartbreaking, and I didn't notice it when that picture was taken initially. But he looked sad, he looked defeated, and broke my heart because we had pre-K and then kindergarten in a public school. Then I moved into a private school, and in that private school, he flourished because the first 30 minutes of the morning they would go out and scoop poop, and they had llama and chickens and lots of different animals there, and he loved it. He's always been good with working with his hands. But anyway, he's now, and he had learning disabilities because my daughter, who I told some of you yesterday, my daughter watched her father die at 4. Awful experience. She and I witnessed it. Had post-traumatic stress disorder at a very young age. Used alcohol as a way to cope. Hence Blake. And she and he both lived with me for a while, but it became apparent. She took him and ran off, basically, for about 8 weeks, and I didn't know where they were. And when I found out where they were, I called her, had to go through a friend to get to her, and I said, if you'll just let me come and see him, I will come whenever you say, I will leave whenever you say. I just want a connection with him, because when he was born, I cut the cord. They both came to my home to live. And when she took him and left, and I don't even know everything that happened to him in that 8 weeks that she was gone, but she didn't want to be a parent. I didn't know this until and I adopted him. So he says, I'm the son, grandson, so I got the best title. And I have 2 older children, but he's been the focus for 20 years. So anyway, short story, he's now 20. He has dyslexia and he has ADHD, but what it really is brain damage from alcohol. His old brain swam around in alcohol for 4 months. He has a connection with his biological mother today. It's hard when it's your daughter and your grandson, and I had to choose basically him. But he's 20 years old today. He just got into the welding program in a VOTEC there in Oklahoma. So he's in his last semester of high school, and he's in his first class of welding. He wants to be a welder. He's an amazing young man, and I had help with him. I had a family member who basically homeschooled him. He was kicked out in 5th grade, and the reason they kicked him out was because he was throwing dirt. But you and I both know they just couldn't handle him anymore. And that was a way, and he was in a private school, and they don't have to follow the same rules, but today he attends EPIC, which is a free public education, it's K through 12, a school in Oklahoma that he can do it from home. So he's not presented with teachers, and except for his teacher and other students. And he just started the welding program in January, and the first day of class he was up at 5 o'clock throwing up. And so he came and knocked on the bedroom door, and he said, I'm sick, I can't go. And I said, well, okay, wait a minute, let's talk about this. And so I said, is your stomach cramping? And he said, I don't know what happens. He said, I start shaking and then I go throw up. And after I do that, I can go on. I said, honey, I think it's anxiety. And he said, I haven't had to be in school since 5th grade. He doesn't really consider the one-on-one attention that he gets at school in the same way. And he said, I don't know about, because he was made fun of by the other kids because he couldn't read. The teachers were not necessarily sympathetic, didn't know what to do with him, and he was a behavior problem. So he made it through that first day, and when he came back home, and I was in the middle of a session, and he stepped to the door, and I looked at him, and I went, and thumbs up. He loved it. And so he will graduate in May and go continue on in this welding program. And to see him with his girlfriend today, and if you had told me 6 years ago or so that he would have had a girlfriend, no way, or that he would be thriving as well as he is. And so I watch him with her, and he opens the door, and he treats her with respect. And I mean, all she has to do is say that she needs something, and Blake will get it for her. So, and when I took him home with me to live with me, he was an angry, hurting 2-year-old. So I know the aches and pains and sorrow that goes along with raising rad children. Um, and I think, you guys, if we just don't give up, it's like that starfish poem, and there's lots of starfish on the beach, and somebody's walking along the beach picking them up and throwing them in, throwing one or two in, and somebody says, "There's so many, why are you doing that?" And he said, "Because I saved this one." And we're not going to save all of them, we know that. Sometimes things just don't work out. Sometimes parents, don't necessarily have the skill, don't have the tools to be able to handle these kids. And these kids are tough. At best, they're tough. So that's why I put this up here. It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with conflict resolution, but I love it. If we don't find a way to prevent the painful abandonment, abuse, and exploitation of children, we will spend the rest of our lives building mental hospitals and prisons. I love this. So now let's talk a little bit about conflict resolution. First thing I want you to do is I want you to think about a conversation that you have had that didn't go well. Didn't go well. And in a few minutes, I'm going to have you pair up with one other person, and I want you to share that conversation. And this is about being vulnerable. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Brené Brown, but she does some excellent stuff on vulnerability, and I love it. And, this is about being vulnerable. It's hard to get up here and talk about my life, in some areas of it, because it wasn't all roses and peachy. I lost a husband my husband died when he was 36 years old. I was 34, and we had a 4 and an 8-year-old. My world changed in a heartbeat. And if it hadn't been, I was working on a master's when my husband died, but it was in education, not in psychology and counseling. And I understand what it feels like to want to kill yourself, for a long time, and I'm going to say for a good year after he died, I was suicidal off and on. So, that actual window period that someone is actively suicidal is very small. So thank goodness people intervened with me when I was in that brief window period. I would drive to therapy in Oklahoma City and think that I'm going to run into the median, hit those concrete barriers, because I thought my children would be better off with somebody else because I didn't have the coping skills. I came from a very stoic family. Crying is seen as a sign of weakness. I grew up in Bubba country. Never let them see you sweat. You don't share anything outside your family, but you don't talk about it in your family either. So I had to learn a whole lot about how you share your feelings. What are your feelings? I'll never forget the therapist when she asked me the first time, "What are you feeling?" I looked at her and I said, "What?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm either angry or I'm sad, and I don't have anything in between. And when I get tired of being sad, I go to anger. And when I hurt people and everybody moves away from me, then I switch back to sadness. And those are the only two emotions that I could identify." After about 3 years of therapy, I went back to school, changed my degree plan to counseling and psychology, and that's how I ended up where I am today. So think about a conversation that's been tough for you. So we're going to talk about conflict resolution. Here's the objectives basically of the training. So we're going to talk about conflict resolution, and we're going to talk about crucial conversations. And what I consider to be the most important piece of this training is when we get to the section where we talk about what is a crucial conversation and how do you manage yourself in that. All right, so I know that you can read. I'm not going to read all of those for you. I want you to notice the rhesus monkey thing and think about how we, in a crucial conversation, act like our rad kiddos do when we switch from up here to back here, and all it takes is some intense emotion. And your rhesus monkey comes out, and my gosh, I've had to go make amends many times because somebody said something to me or confronted me, and when I say confront, I don't mean, I mean that's happened before, but confrontation can just simply be, hey, can we sit down and talk about something? Hey, can we sit down and talk about something? And it can trigger my rhesus monkey, and it can trigger your rhesus monkey. All right. So, conflict resolution is simply learning to settle disagreements peacefully. How do you work things out without fighting, name calling, or hurting the feelings of others without running away? How many of you have run from a crucial conversation? Avoidance, yeah. And without going against your feelings and beliefs, and that's an important piece of this too. At one camp that I've been to, we had the staff member correcting staff in front of the children and the parents and everything else. And I thought, oh my gosh. So that night after the meeting with Nancy, we sat down and I said, hey, you can't correct staff in front of staff. It's just like when you're a parent, and your husband or your wife or whoever correct your kiddo when you don't like it. And you cannot step in and correct them while that's going on, or you have just disempowered your spouse with regard to your kiddos. So we sat down and had a crucial conversation. There was another person there with me. I was as cool and as calm as I could possibly be. But sometimes, even when you're in control, it doesn't mean that the outcome is what you want it to be. It doesn't. And one of the things that we talked a little bit about yesterday is we have to make it safe when we're a team or an organization. We have to make it safe to have those tough conversations. It's kind of like one of the things that I had to learn to do when I became a clinical director and then an administrator is had to fire people. And one of the first things I had to do was learn how to get control of my rhesus monkey and calm down so that I could have that conversation. And I've got some cheat sheets for you in a little bit that we'll get to so that you can learn the steps, learn what you need to do, learn how to get control of you. Dr. Andrew Will, you can look him up on the internet, does 4-7-8 breathing. I love that. I love it. And what he suggests is that you practice it twice a day for 6 weeks because you're changing a habit. You're changing a habit. And let me demonstrate for you what that looks like. And what it is you're going to do 4 repetitions of breathing in, yoga breathing. Tongue goes up to behind your front teeth like that. You're going to breathe out first, blow everything out to start. I'm going to talk to you through it, then I'm going to demonstrate it. So you breathe in to a count of 4. You hold your breath to a count of 7. And you release your breath to a count of 8. And you repeat that 4 times. Now, what I've learned to do to manage and remember how many times I've done this is I just use my fingers. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate what this looks like, and it's an excellent tool. I was in my office one day, and a man came in angry, and he sat down on my couch, and he said, I don't want to be here. I'm court ordered to come see you. And I thought, well, now the judge can't court order you to a particular therapist. I mean, you might do that. You might court order them to treatment, put them in a hospital, or send them to counseling, but he can't make you come to see me. So he sat down, and you try to set up your offices so that you've got an escape route. And my chair was across from him, but it was right by the door. And I was thinking, okay, can I jump over that arm of that chair and get out that door before he can get to me? Probably not. So I caught myself doing this because he was angry, and the more we talked, I mean, the more he relaxed and backed up. But he was, when he came in and sat down, he was scooting toward the. I mean, he could have reached out and grabbed me by the neck by the time he was at that peak. I caught myself sitting back in my chair and doing this without even thinking about it, doing this, because I don't ever suggest someone do something that I haven't done myself. I don't ever. 4-7-8 breathing. In to a count of 4, hold to a count of 7, out to a count of 8. That's all it is. But you have to practice it twice a day for 6 weeks for that habit to be there. And I finished the session and I thought, oh my gosh, because when I did this, I sat back, I talked to him in a calm tone, told him, you don't have to come and see me. I explained the judge might court order you to see a therapist, but it doesn't have to be me. And we have a really good male therapist here. Can I recommend you to him? When I went out and got the guy's business card and brought it back into him, I'm in a practice with, I think there are 12 of us. And that man calmed down, and I told him, I said, you can leave now if you want to. This is not, you don't have to see me. I don't know what your issues are, and I don't have to know what your issues are. I would encourage you to go talk to someone. Hey, here's a card of one of our male therapists that's great in my book. But he stayed nearly that entire hour, and by the time he left, he was calm, I was calm, he shook my hand. Haven't seen him since. But the important thing is I got control of the rhesus monkey. Because what I wanted to do was get out of there so fast. I knew I sure couldn't take him. He was going to get to me before I could get to him. Okay, so it's learning to settle agreements without a fight. Conflict resolution. Why do you need it? Teresa, can you read the bullet points about why we need it for me, please?
Because knowing how to handle conflict in a positive way can help you stay safe from violence, feel good about yourself, learn to respect others. With conflict resolution, everyone wins.
And isn't that what we want, for everybody to win? For it to be a win for all parties involved. Okay, here are rules for dealing with conflict. And I don't go into a great deal of detail about this because it's going to be in the PowerPoint. It's in the PowerPoint. Nancy's going to have it. I want to focus more on what exactly is a crucial conversation. How do you survive? Okay, so the first one is identify the problem. Focus on that problem only. Don't get, how many of you sandbag in your relationship? And by sandbag, I mean you stuff it. Something happens that you don't like and you don't go tell them. You just, okay, I'm just going to. And we all probably do that to some degree. And I kind of think about a cup that sits on the inside of us, and everything that we don't talk about, everything that we don't share with the person that we're having the issue with goes in the cup. And it doesn't matter what that issue is, that last drop, it could be something small, throwing dirt. But once that cup is full and that last drop goes in, things are spilling out. And there are many ways to learn how to dump the cup. And we've all got one. Attack the problem, not the person. Listen with an open mind. And that doesn't mean that when they're talking, I am planning what I'm going to say back. Now, I've done that before. Hadn't worked out really well. But that means not necessarily planning what I'm going to say. It's listen. Put your pencil down if you're sitting with someone. Make eye contact. What we learn in graduate school, open posture. Arms, not, this is a closed posture for sure. You relax, you take some deep breaths so that you can be in control of the rhesus monkey. And then you make eye contact. And I like to nod occasionally so that they know I'm paying attention, and then restating. This is what I heard you say. To make sure that we're on the same page. We're talking about the same issue. treat the person's feelings with respect, and I, by golly, have to take responsibility for how I handle that situation. I don't get to blame you. Okay, so here's some steps to problem solving. Calm down. Do some breathing exercises. There's lots of different breathing exercises, and one of the hardest things, and I don't know if this happens for you, Teresa, any of the therapists in the room besides Teresa? Okay. That's right, Michelle. Okay. One of the hardest things for me is having clients that will go home and practice those breathing exercises. And that is the imperative to being able to control the rhesus monkey. There's 4 square breathing. Snipers in training in the armed services use 4 square breathing as one of their types. There's figure 8 pattern, there's star breathing, there's triangle breathing. But getting clients to go home and practice that, getting our families to practice that, mom or dad, is hard to do. Now, I don't know if you have difficulty with that in your clients, but, when I say, okay, what breathing techniques are you using? And when I worked inpatient, when we sent kids home, they had a safety plan when they went home. And one of those safety plans is, what are you going to do to calm yourself down? And every one of them would say, breathing. And I said, well, what technique are you using? And they could tell me, well, I use 4 square breathing. Well, how many times do you practice that? I don't. They could tell me exactly what their safety plan was for discharge, what different coping skills they could use, and not a single one of them could apply it. Not a single one could apply it. Describe the problem. Be specific. I gave you an example. Don't correct me or any other staff in front of the kids or the parents. You disempower that individual. Get both sides of the story. Think about solutions. And when we're brainstorming solutions, everything applies. We're going to make a list of all the different things. And sometimes I would tease around and I would say, well, we could shoot them, or you could jump in the middle of them and beat them up. Because we want to put down all of the solutions, teaching them how to brainstorm all of those. Weigh every solution, think about possible results, ask yourself, so what's going to happen if I do this? Will we both get our needs met, which is really important. Will we both get our needs met? Sometimes it's just, hear me. Hear me. Carry it out. Later talk about whether the plan's working. If it's not, try another solution. I'm going to give you a cheat sheet because I had to have cheat sheets when I started doing this. And if you want this PowerPoint, I know Nancy's going to post it, but if you'll just, I don't print things out anymore because I spent lots of money printing things out, and then I see people throw them in the trash on the way out, or leave them on the table. So if you want this, whenever, all you have to do is send me your email, and I'll get it to you.
What's your email?
It is all lowercase, Sharon, SharonNeasbitt, LPC.
Oh, wait.
Okay. Yeah, hang on a minute. Let me back up and I'll just put it in there for you. Communication. Now, I tell you what, this is certainly something I had to learn how to do because we didn't talk about problems in my family. We didn't have problems, Suck it up, buttercup, rub some dirt on it, you're good. I will tell you a funny story. When I went to therapy, Steve died in March. I started therapy in April, and at Thanksgiving time, I did individual with this particular therapist and group. And in this group were 9 women. And she gave us an assignment. She said, your homework assignment for Thanksgiving is to go home and tell one member of your family that you think is safe to hear your feelings. Tell one. And then come back, and I went to therapy. I drove from Southwest Oklahoma to Central Oklahoma City area for 3 years, basically, every week, sometimes twice a week. I had to do it or I was going to die. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I'm telling you, I know what it's like to be at the end of your rope and not have any way to tie a knot in it, and so that I can hang on. Okay, so Thanksgiving, tell one person. So I go home and I have a big family. I'm the oldest of 6. I have 5, well, we had 5 siblings. I have 2 that are deceased. They were all married. They all had kids. We all had the outlaws and the in-laws and everybody come. And we would have it at my mother's house, and she would cook the turkey and the dressing and the giblet gravy, and then we would bring all the sides. And that was the only time of the year that we ever all got together. So we're there at Thanksgiving, and it's been a few months since Steve died, and I didn't cry every time somebody mentioned his name anymore. So we pray just before we eat, and I have a sister who is good at that, so she was assigned to the prayer. And then after she finished praying, I said, before we eat, could I just say something? You know, I was always kind of an overachiever. So I just told them all. I said, and I said, I'm sorry if I cry. I know that makes you uncomfortable, but I want to thank you for all that you've done to help me. I mean, I had a brother and sister-in-law that moved in with my children and I. And they met emotional needs because I just could not. I was so ill prepared for death. So I gave my little spiel, and nobody said a word except my little 90-year-old grandmother, who we brought over from the nursing home, who was blind as a bat from glaucoma. Here's what she said. So I finished my spiel. Nobody moved, and she said, "Who is that talking?" Which meant what?
You didn't hear a thing.
Huh?
You hadn't heard a thing.
She hadn't heard a thing. Shut up. Don't, and that's the way my family was. If any sensitive topic came up, they could not deal with it. And so I go back to my group, and I'm poor me on Saturday morning, and I'm saying, oh my God, I got up there and I said, oh, this, and the therapist started laughing. Her name happened to be Sharon. She started laughing, and I looked at her and I said, what is so funny about that? She goes, Sharon, the assignment was tell one person. You just set yourself up to be rejected by everybody. And that was true. And she would tell me months before this, Sharon. And she told us when we started this group, she said, everybody has to have a herd of buffaloes. And I was like, my dad was a rancher, cattle farm. I mean, wheat, cotton, and cattle. So I was familiar with cattle. And I thought, a herd of buffaloes. And so I was kind of outspoken. So I said, what the hell are you talking about, a herd of buffaloes? And she said, I'm talking about 2 to 4 people that you are not related to because your family is like a mobile. You hit one of those little birdies and it bounces around, but you know what that birdie, all the other birdies want you to do is get back in line. Maintain the status quo. They will not be able to support you through the changes that you need to make. They love you, and I'm sure you love them, but they cannot do that for you. Herd of buffaloes. And so my herd of buffaloes started out to be those women in the group. And for years, we all got together at holiday times and shared our families and shared our cooking traditions. And it was, they were my herd of buffaloes. But then I, decided that, well, okay, I think after 3 years, I can do this. And my therapist never ever said to me, oh, I don't think, and what she said to me was, and I challenged her in the beginning because she was the only safe person in my life then. The only safe person in my life. And I one day said to her after group and in my individual session with her, I said, so, just this cocky way, I said, what happens to me when you decide you're finished with me? And she looked at me and she goes, well, that's not the way it works. Now, I wasn't a therapist then, okay? That's not the way it works. She said, we both decide when it's time for you to leave. I don't kick you to the curb. And I would prefer that you not just exit the group and without talking and telling the group that you're ready to go, and you and I can decide forever or together. So after I made that announcement in group, then we had my session, and she said, what happened to the plan that you and I are going to talk about this first? I was always kind of bullheaded. But that lady saved my life. you know, and I had an opportunity later on, because we both were in the same general area, to work with her. We did intensives on the weekend. I don't know how many of you know or have ever heard of Evelyn Leidy. She used to do family reconstructions, wonderful ways to solve issues within a family without actually talking to that person. You know, we several therapists came together, and we had probably 20 people, and they were all people in therapy with these particular therapists. And we picked family members out of the group that we had, and we reconstructed situations in the family that had been horrible for us. And I was able to say everything that I wanted to say to my mother and get over being mad at her without ever having to talk to her. You know, years ago, we used to say, hey, you know, go confront that person that you have an issue with. That's crazy. That's nuts. That's not safe. It can destroy families and destroy relationships. So, no, you don't have to go and address that person. But I went to therapy. It saved my life. I highly recommend it for everybody. And, you know, every therapist needs a good therapist. You know, I need somebody to help me do a checkup from the neck up, because I can sure get off track. We get triggered by clients. I work right now with a gentleman who is terminally ill from cancer, and that man has taught me more about living than I think probably anybody else, because he's dying. Okay. So avoid interruptions. Go to a safe, quiet place when you're talking to that person. Ask questions when they're finished. And why do you ask questions? Clarification. Make sure we're on the same page. That's vitally important. Sit up, face the person, do that open posture. You know, make eye contact, nod occasionally. Let your body language tell that person that you're paying attention. I hear you. I understand what you're saying. Okay, let me see if I got this right. You are talking to me because I embarrassed you in front of everybody by calling you out on a situation. Is that, and it's either yes or no. And we keep asking questions until we get it right, until we get on the same page with that person. Say what you're hearing. We just talked about that. Restating what's on your mind without being mean. And that was one of the hardest things for me. And, you know, I would get triggered in the beginning because my mother was a rageaholic in my home. And addressing her or trying to talk to her, I mean, it didn't matter who the person was. When a crucial conversation, I was faced with that, I would see my mother. I would hear my mother. And so learning how to not get triggered and stick my mother in there in all those situations was hard but vitally important. Be assertive. What does assertive mean to you? No doormat.
Sticking up for your values.
Sticking up for your values. What? Clear. Anything else? What does assertive mean to you? Using I statements. Paul, I need your help again.
I'm doing good helping you.
Well, I appreciate it.